It all starts with one idea. Have you ever wondered how today's top CEOs, business leaders, and people who work for the most innovative companies in the world found success? Join host George Davison as he explores the innovators that are shaping tomorrow's world today.
Well, we have Jim Levine here. He is the founder and the entrepreneur who started a company called Regency Technologies. And it's quite a large organization today that started out of an idea back, a little while ago. And you've got, about 1,500 employees nowadays?
Yep.
Wow, Jim. That's quite an accomplishment. Can you walk us back a little bit and let's talk to our audience a little about back in the days when you were first starting out? Can you take us back to where the idea came from to start your business?
Sure. And thanks for having me, George. So Regency Technologies started out of a situation like many small businesses where myself and a handful of people were working for a bigger organization, and the company got sold. And that company was an equipment leasing company. Selling large mainframe computers, leasing large mainframe computers to banks and insurance companies and hospitals. And at that time, I was working for a small division of the company that was responsible for remarketing assets when they came back off lease.
Okay.
And when the company got sold, that particular division was not part of the sale.
Okay, so let me walk that back a little bit for this audience and say that an asset would be something like a lot of computers back in the old days. It would sit on the desk at some big company. They would use these computers and pay a fee to do that. And at the end of the period, all those computers would go back somewhere. Is that right?
Similar, but actually, we've been at it for so long that back in those days, they were big mainframe computers.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going back before even PCs and laptops. So it was like, you're thinking about the big IBM Blue, they used to call it Big Iron. Mm-hmm. And so this was before the advent of the PC became something that we're, all familiar with today. And that was part of the genesis of the business, is that it had been changing so rapidly. Right. And moving away from mainframes and mid-range and just having what they used to call dumb terminals sitting on people's desks. Probably not a great name at the time, but that's what they referred to them as.
Yes.
And essentially the group that I was with, which was only about a half a dozen people, could see the writing on the wall that things were changing and things were moving to the desktop. And the individuals in these companies, forget about consumers, were starting to use desktop computing, and there were more and more assets that were coming into the workplace. So we saw a need for logistics, moving these things around, either installing them, removing them. Forget about data wiping. No one was thinking about data security, and no one was thinking about environmental at that time. It was all about monetizing the value when that equipment was coming back off lease. So we sort of inserted ourselves into the equation as the equipment, the in-place equipment installation started to grow, and provided services for big companies to move this equipment in and out of their organizations.
Okay, and that was where you were working for a company at that time that did that. Is that correct?
Well, essentially, yes. It was a division of the company that got sold, and so that was from 1996 to 1998. And by 1998, we saw clearly that we wanted to be in this business. So we formed Regency Technologies and pretty much bought that division from the original founders, myself and one other person.
Interesting.
Yep.
So the name Regency existed at that time, or did you create that name?
We created that name in 1998.
And does it have a meaning to you? What the word Regency?
Well, the computer industry was everybody in the computer industry had three letters. It was ABC, 1, 2, 3, and IT this, and it was everything sounded the same. So we did a little research on names that would sound familiar, and Regency kept coming up in the search that everybody had familiarity with it. It sounded regal. It sounded important. So we said, let's just call it Regency Technologies. And to this day, I still laugh because we can remember when we were 6 months old and had no clients and no business, we would call on people and they would say, oh, we know you guys. So
that's a good name you selected.
Yeah.
Good story.
Yep.
All right. So you started this organization, and let's walk it back a little further than that. What was going on in your life at that time? Was it everything just moving along in a easy way, or was there a great deal of complexity in your life to work your way through the beginning of your business?
So, like a lot of these stories I'm sure you've heard in the past, it was not a straightforward path. I, had a job, landscape changed underneath my feet, had to figure something out. I was newly married for a couple of years, had a kid, new house, and, a job that was not, really, I didn't know where it was going to go. But, so it was definitely an uncertain period of time. But I definitely had a vision. I could see where things were going. I could see what was happening with technology, and myself and the group of people that I was working with believed that this was going to continue to grow. So we really were committed to sticking with it. And like a lot of other entrepreneurs that I'm sure you've talked to, when you have that feeling, it really gets into your DNA, and it takes a lot to try to move you off of that. It's not really about the paycheck. It's not about, the security. It's about figuring it out.
So, back in the earlier days for me, I was, 40 hours a week was the amount of hours you were supposed to work. When you were starting up your organization, were you working 40 hours a week?
A lot more than 40 hours a week. It was 7 days a week. You'd have the 40-hour-a-week routine, but then it was going home. Fortunately, when we first started, I only lived about 8 minutes, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you looked at it, 8 minutes from the operation. So, it would be play with the kids, put them to bed, go back to the operation, there on the weekends, preparing on Sundays for the next week. So, it was a lot of time.
Yeah, one of my mentors when I was a young person in high school, and he said to me, well, George, if do you want to be average? And I said, no, I don't want to be average. He said, well, how many hours should you work a week? And then I said, well, I think the work week is supposed to be 40 hours a week, so it's 40 hours a week. And he said, 40 hours a week if you want to be average, George. And I got to thinking about that, and I thought, wow, so I need to get to 40 hours a week every week as fast as I can, so I can work more hours than that to get ahead and not be average. And that was a mindset that really was put in my head when I was younger and helped me a lot when I started the business that I'm in. But it sounds like you also had to work more than 40 hours a week to get ahead. Is that fair?
It is fair, but I also want to be candid that I was never, I didn't really think of it like this, I had to work 40 hours a week or I had to work 80 hours a week. It was more about, I want to go back. I want to figure this next thing out. I was liking it a lot.
Yes.
And I hadn't had that experience really before. I was just like any other young guy. Same as you said, you sort of think that there's a construct that you're supposed to follow. And this thing just sort of happened. I never really planned to be an entrepreneur. I wasn't really thinking about much of anything. I wanted to have a family. I wanted to have kids and have some security and do some fun things. But I didn't have this perfect vision of where I wanted to go. That part just sort of happened. And when it did, I wanted more. So I never really felt like, I have to go back and do this or I'm working too much. There were certainly times where I was aware that I probably should pump the brakes and pay attention to some other things in my life too. Yeah. And I would say, 23 years later, I'm very fortunate that I always tell people when it's Sunday, I don't get the Sunday scaries that I have to go back to work on Monday. I'm excited to pull out of the driveway on Monday and see what's in store for the following week.
That's a beautiful thing. You know, you found something that you like. It doesn't sound like it's work anymore, and you enjoy doing what you do.
Yeah.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
Because you know, we sleep a third of our life, we work a third, and we have a third with our families and that type of time. So finding what you like is a real important part of having a quality life, I believe. So
Yeah.
Congratulations on
Thanks.
on accomplishing that. Do you believe there's anything in particular that helped you to find success?
I would say, without sounding too cliche, it was family upbringing. Grew up, had a close-knit family on the east side of Cleveland. I'm unique in the sense that I had 4 grandparents that were all born in Cleveland, Ohio. So, most people of my generation had some grandparents that were either immigrants who came to this country, but I literally had 4 grandparents that were born in Cleveland. All of them started with nothing, became successful over their lives, taught the lessons of hard work and family. So,
Yes.
Again, a lot of kids who are growing up don't necessarily realize it when they're kids or even young adults, but somewhere along the way, you sort of laugh inside and say, I must have been paying attention somehow because I'm doing a lot of the same things that I saw as I was growing up.
So would you say that your grandparents were mentors? And if so, that's interesting. And then did you have any other mentors that you'd mention?
For sure. One in particular, my father's father, that grandfather, somebody who I looked up to my entire life, and I was very fortunate that he lived to 102.
Wow.
and he lived to 102 with full mental capacity, lived on his own. I mean, was playing golf 3 days a week, and he just broke a hip at 102 and ended up getting pneumonia, and that was it. But he had a blessed life, and I got to hear so many stories from him throughout his life, not just remembering when, but even when I was starting the business, he would come out and see it and give me advice on things. So
nice.
Really, really lucky to have him in my life. And then, there were plenty of other people, early managers that I had from companies that I was working at as a teenager and even right out of college that taught me things. So, I was really lucky to have people in my life that sort of sports coaches,
Right.
teaching me the value of hard work and teamwork and all those things.
It really helps out, build your confidence as you're younger, and it kind of sheds a little light on the subject that you'll make your way, you'll find your way, just keep working at it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I also, along the way, while we were building the business too, I've been very fortunate, a wife who has been completely supportive.
Yes.
And, I've seen plenty of situations where it's not the same, but she's been amazing. So we've been married for almost 30 years. And from the day that we started the business, she's never second guessed. She never complained about working too late. Was really a team player. So, I consider her a partner in the business.
Well, it's wonderful. It's wonderful to have that kind of support there with you.
Yep.
A partner who's always in your corner and believes in you, right?
Yep. Makes it easier.
Yes. All right. So let's touch on a slightly different subject. Knowing what you know today, what advice would you give, a young person who is entering into your industry?
A young person entering into our particular industry, and I'll even broaden it a little bit into the recycling sustainability industry, is be prepared to get your MBA on the job. Because the recycling industry, a lot of people think of it in one way, they yellow vests and forklifts and shredders, but it's got everything. So you have to be prepared to be learning about finance, IT, logistics, accounting, marketing and sales, operations, health and safety, and you have to be able to do it all while getting your hands dirty.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just sitting back in a boardroom or a nice office looking at graphs and charts and making decisions. It's very, very hands-on. So you have to be able to connect at the ground level of the business.
Yes.
And then you've also got to be able to do all those other things.
Mm-hmm. So your business continues to grow.
Yes.
And, I think back in the older days, the world of recycling was like you'd see piles of steel just sitting there and rusting and whatnot. But the world of recycling and technology has been it's been combined. Can you, you've pioneered a new industry. Can you look into the future, with us a little bit and project what do you see in the world of recycling, sustainability, the importance of this as we go forward as a group of people?
How much time do we have? It's again, one of the reasons I think that I'm still very energized about the business is that, in a way you can be, especially when we talk about electronics,
Mm-hmm.
Versus traditional scrap recycling with maybe non-ferrous metals and ferrous metals that tend to, the constituent commodities and products that have longer lasting lives, where with electronics, it changes so fast. One of the luxuries of the business,
Mm-hmm.
if you will, is that you don't really have to think about what's going to happen next. You just let it happen. So being at the end of life, I can see what you might be using as technology today, and I know that in 2 to 3 years from now, we're going to be figuring out how to recycle that material because you're going to be using the new thing. So whether it's this microphone, that mixing board, these lights, it's all going to change. So we're just watching what happens. So part of what we do in looking at growth is what's happening in the world. So even watching your shows, so we talk about plastic. We
Yes.
know that plastic has got infinite potential in terms of improvement at this point in so many different ways. Some of them very obvious, some of them not obvious. We look at EV batteries for cars. Well, the same chemistries that are in your cell phone battery are going to be in huge demand in a much bigger way than they've ever been by sheer volume
Mm-hmm.
as we move into electric vehicles. So the cars of the next 3 years are basically giant computers with big batteries.
Interesting.
So we're already in negotiations with people, with OEMs, auto manufacturers, people who are building the batteries. That there's the cycle of the closed loop of recycling for the commodities that will go into electric vehicle batteries is going to be like going back 150 years when the integrated steel mill started right around here.
Right.
And it was the byproducts that were coming out of the steel making
Yes.
that were going right back into the mill to be used to make steel. Think of electronic vehicle batteries the same way. And it hasn't even started. So when we see the growth, or we see, we look down the road, we see things like that.
That's wonderful. So as we're talking through that area, would you say that the importance of recycling and drawing these very precious materials back out and putting new life to them through, by extracting them during the recycling process, how much is that helping us not have to go and mine those materials and to go and find that elsewhere in the world? How much is recycling adding to our ability to make new products and not have to go into let's say the forest and start to take out another mine or something to that effect?
Yeah. Again, it's a huge area to discuss. And just to keep things sort of time stamped, and this is, it gets a little bit heady, but we have these conversations around our shop, is that if you just look at what happened to the world in the last year and you think about maybe how some of these things happened in the first place. and how disease can spread, and the movement of people, and the carbon footprint that happens in so many areas of our lives. We think of recycling as a nice thing. We think of it as this, you put your recyclables into the blue bag and the nice people take it away and it gets sorted, and that's a great story. But really, recycling is about common sense and economics. And I feel like in the last, say, 75 years, the world has gotten a little bit lazy with it because we've had so many natural resources at our fingertips, and we consume them, and we don't really think too much about it. We just think that we get what we want when we want it, and regardless of what part of the world it comes from, if they make it cheaper, we're going to buy it from there. And while a lot of people think that they want things that are grown local or made local, do they really want to pay what it costs to make those things if they're not just being farmed out to all different parts of the world to be made at a lower cost? So I think it does ultimately have a big impact. And as we start to see people really wake up to, wow, maybe I do need to keep my footprint a little bit smaller, people start thinking about using less. And, when we talk about manufacturers who are making and selling things, whether it's electronics or automobiles, most of those companies aren't really that interested in making less, right?
Sure.
They want to make more, but there needs to be some kind of cultural shift to at least reuse what we've made in the first place.
Interesting. So there could be a lot of opportunity there, a lot of innovation, it sounds like, in that space of how to bring things at end of life back into the in the world of business so that we can reuse it more, let's say, many more times.
Right.
And create less impact.
Sure. And especially we think of things like rare earth metals, cobalt, lithium. These elements are only found in certain parts of the world. So now you start getting into geopolitical situations where if whether it's in China or Chile, do we own the rights to this material just because we're the United States and we want to make more EV batteries or cell phone batteries than anybody? We have to work with people. So, or do we become more dependent on creating sustainable recycling solutions to recover that material and reuse it that way? So that's where I come back to saying recycling is about economics. People like to think of it as this nice idea, and it is, but if you think of it in a more basic way, it's just common sense and economics. And that's always been, and that always will be. Because if somebody can do something that's convenient and makes economic sense, typically you get more people's attention.
Right. And that's good for everybody who's younger in this audience to understand. If you can use your observational skills and identify needs, come up with products or services, and you can do that at the right price, you're more than likely going to be helping others out there that will want your product or service.
Correct.
So, okay. So let's talk directly to them for a moment then. What classes would you tell a young person to focus on today to be career ready?
Well, kind of like all those different areas that I mentioned, if selfishly speaking, to me, the most well-rounded person that we can get has a little bit of everything. So I think that everybody, all young people today should be taking some kind of general accounting class. I think too many people sort of move past the numbers, and we're constantly analyzing pounds and tons and pieces and dollars and doing time studies. How long does it take to process this material? How much electricity did we use? How much propane did we use in a forklift? How much shrink wrap did we use? So I think numbers are really important.
Math, in other words.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very underrated. IT is huge. So still big demand for programmers, network engineers, everything is moving to the cloud. Even in our business, everything is driven off of an ERP system. So when people think of the old recycling yard, so much of that is just gone today. I mean, even our forklift drivers are using RFID to weigh pallets before they go onto a shipping container.
So, can you explain ERP and then RFID, please?
Apologize. So an ERP is basically a software system to run the business. So it's inventory management, it's purchase orders and sales orders, it's accounting, it's weighing material in and out of your operations and counting manifest serial numbers. All the data that flows in and out of the company, we do through a centralized system.
Okay, and that's in every business. So every business has systems that help it to run.
Yep.
And it's a way to put information in, and then management can look at all this data, and it helps them to navigate or steer the way into the future, right?
Correct.
Very important.
Yep.
And then you mentioned RFID. Could you mention to the audience what that is, please?
So it's basically using, if you think of your remote controls on a television, your old remote controls before we had smart remotes, is basically using radio frequency to connect with technology that's wireless.
Mm-hmm.
So it's allowing different, in our scenario, it's allowing material handlers to not have to get out of their vehicles to write things down on paper or put stickers on boxes. Everything is using QR codes. We're scanning. I have to say what QR codes are too.
That's okay. But I think if you said QR code and scanning, that goes in the same realm.
So, just being able to capture information using current modern technology.
Mm-hmm.
So people having that skill set to understand how to use those types of devices is big. So it's not just traditional blue-collar work without having some of these skills.
Right. So you're mentioning, it sounds like science, technology, we're looking at STEM for the, science, technology, engineering, math. And so it sounds like that's important that you're seeing in your field of enterprise.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So if I could ask you to do one thing over again in your high school or early days, what would it be? What activity would you choose to go back and do over again?
Okay, so, as I think similar to other entrepreneurs where we try to find things, we tend to be a little compulsive maybe on certain things. When I was 33, 20 years ago, I started playing guitar.
Mm.
And I started playing guitar because I have a son who's a musician, and I used to take him to trumpet lessons, and I would sit around the music shop and fiddle around with the guitar. And one day the owner of the store said, "Why don't you just start taking lessons?" And I said, it's a good idea. I need something else to, spend more of the time that I don't have. And I've been playing for 20 years. I play in a rock cover band in Cleveland, Ohio, and and I absolutely love it. This last year kind of sucked because, we didn't have a chance to play, but we're getting ready to play again. And I found that by opening up that part of my brain and playing music allowed me to get a healthy, mindful escape, because even as much as I love what I do, sometimes you just have to do something else.
Sure.
And you need some time for yourself. So if I was able to go back in time, I would have started playing guitar much earlier.
Interesting. It's creator activities or a release, so when we work like we do, and if you have a hobby, that's a great way to, just let your mind go and kind of drift into that creator space.
Right.
And we see a lot of that. Everything from writing to like some of the music, drawing, etc. So it's a good release. And they do learn some of those things in school, but they do play a role later in life.
Buying guitars is fun too. It's a little addicting, but
I'm glad to hear you like doing that. You must have quite a collection by now.
I have a pretty decent collection. I'm still working on it though.
Hopefully you'll never stop. Okay, so if we were to say, again, we're going to take a peek into the future. What does your company look like in the future?
I would say we will continue I again, without knowing for sure, I think some of the things I could point to is I think we'll have expansion along the way internationally somehow. Starting in one location in Cleveland, Ohio, and now having 8 locations in the United States, from Washington State to Tampa, Florida. We do business all throughout Europe. We do business in Middle East, Africa. We are doing business in Mexico, and we've got great partners that we've worked with for a long time. But the more and more that we get involved with multinational companies, I can see that that's going to be something that would most likely happen in our future.
That's great to hear. Well done. All right, so if we were going to offer a little bit of feedback to our audience about the importance of social skills, if I'm looking at a basket of hard skills, let's say IT and math, how important are the social skills in the world you're operating in your business?
It's huge. And I probably should have put that number 1, because people skills, our managers, our leads, our supervisors, we have to have the ability to communicate. We've got people from Nepal, people from Mexico, people from Tibet that work in our different organizations. Sometimes it's based on where our facilities are, and we work with labor pools. We're working with accounting people, IT, and you have to have the ability to communicate at different levels throughout the organization. And as a manager, you have to be connected with people. They have to believe in you. You have to believe in them. You have to be a counselor. You have people who have their family issues. So you've got to have that ability to connect with people, because everything about our company starts with people. And the financial, it's a very unique industry in the sense that I've never seen or heard of an industry like ours where so much of the financial model is in the hands of a labor pool. Sometimes we think of labor pools as doing the tough stuff, and it's really the people who are up in the ivory tower that are making all the big financial gain decisions. But when we're out on a sorting line and we're separating copper from steel, from aluminum, from gold, we have to make sure we can't be everywhere. Those people in the offices can't be everywhere at one time. We have to make sure that the people on our floors understand what it is that they're doing, because material comes in every single hour of every single day. And if you start wrong on the floor, it goes all the way through the machine.
Interesting.
The wrong way. So we have to be teaching and training, visual workplace, making sure that we have people who are multilingual managers that can really communicate, so we're not misinterpreting what we meant to say.
So language, English, public speaking, collaboration, teamwork, those are all soft skills that you can gain some of that experience in your schools, right? You can learn it on a sports field. You can, if you were playing a guitar in a band, you're going to speak with the other members in your band, right? And create relationships. I think that's an important thing to mention as a young person. If your hard skills in classes and your grades are, not all A's, don't worry. That's not, the life isn't going to judge you that way. There are other skill sets that you can have as well.
Absolutely.
And me having an A in some class isn't going to get me through an interview with you if I was going to try to join your organization.
Correct.
So it's very important, I think, that the audience understands that. All right. So how would you suggest students get hands-on experience to build skills that would lead them toward let's say, a good adult life?
Well, I think working at a young age is a great thing. I grew up in a family where by the time we were all 16 years old, it was expected that on top of playing sports and doing your schoolwork, you should get a job. And it should be a job working somewhere where it's not for a family, a real job, whether it's working at a car wash, working at an IT company, doing whatever. And I think that that's very important to, a lot of times we'll hear people say, well, we just don't have the time because we're so wrapped up in doing one thing or another. But I know that was a big part of my learning, getting hands-on experience and working with mentors that I didn't necessarily know and didn't have a vested interest in my future and learning how the real world's going to work. And I would encourage that. We did early on, just one interesting aside to sort of connect that. We started doing some AP environmental science field trips.
Okay.
And our business was in the same community that I lived in and had a connection with some of the people at the schools, and hooked up with the AP environmental science teacher who asked if, when she had heard about the business, would you ever do this? And first thing I thought was, man, a bunch of kids running around, a recycling operation might not be the smartest thing in the world. But we did it, and it was a huge success.
Oh.
And we did it for probably, I'm going to say 5 years in a row.
Nice.
The interesting part of it is we started getting these kids who were asking if they could do summer interns.
Yes.
Never had done a summer internship before. Once again, we're like, why not? What could possibly go wrong? And so we did it a few times. And my favorite story of all is that we have a he's still young. But we had a 16-year-old who came through our summer internship program, and he is now running our Phoenix operation at 30 years old.
Wonderful.
He took a few years to go to college, and after college he was figuring out what to do, and one of our managers had spotted him working at a fast food restaurant, as a part-time gig while he was looking for a job, and said, why don't you come back for us? We're growing. And he came back to work for us and has been with us ever since.
That's a great story.
Yeah. So, there's all kinds of opportunities to get involved at a young age if there's the right connection.
So, do you believe anybody can be successful?
I guess at some level.
Okay. So if they apply themselves, businesses are always looking for, people that can help to achieve the objectives, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, I think a lot of it depends on, what's the overall situation. But I think there are a lot of people who fall through the cracks because there isn't the right connection. There isn't the right sort of net to grab people. And, that's another area where we've been working with programs to attract people to work in our tech centers where we're doing repair of electronics. And what we found is that there are a lot of people with, let's say, Asperger's disease.
Yes.
Who might not be able to interview well. They might not have those social skills that you were talking about. But man, some of the smartest people that you'll ever meet, and want to focus on repairing things, fixing things. They have that intuitive sense to do a skill that we're looking for. So sometimes if we're looking what I would call mainstream, it's hard to find somebody who wants to work in a warehouse and use technical skills. People want to, do things that are, today they think of, making an app or doing something that's a little bit cleaner, I'll say.
Right.
And so we've had really good success working with some programs in some of our marketplaces to bring people into our operation like that. And it's just amazing to me. We're not even on an adjusted comparison basis for production, that these people produce at a higher rate than what you would call somebody who's mainstream.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about that a little more. I think you're touching on a good lesson, because I've seen some of that as well in my career, where some people that are marginalized, they're just considered not all that intelligent. They don't maybe they don't speak so well. They can't do math well, and they get kind of put into a bucket of lower performance. I think at times it's almost as though that can be considered a strength, because you have to work harder, and you know it. And because of that, you're willing to put in extra time or to reach out in a different way to try and find your way in life. And whereas somebody who has most things already working for them, they don't navigate that way. And so sometimes a weakness can be actually a strength, is what I'm trying to get across.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, well, let's continue on then. If you were going to have a suggestion out there for our audience, what kind of skills would I need to become a good maker or a good contributor inside your organization? We call them maker tips here. But do you have any tips that would be insightful for our young people about making?
So, regardless of what position you're taking, I shouldn't say that. Most of the accounting people don't do this. But anybody who's going to get into, I'd say, the nuts and bolts part, whether it's sales and marketing, logistics, or in operations, we put them into what we call our triage department. We'll put people into that department at least for a month, sometimes for 2 months. Doesn't matter what the pay scale is, doesn't matter, because what we want to do is we feel like that's sort of the nerve center of where everything starts.
Yes.
And it's amazing that you can see how quickly, again, I don't care what college education somebody had, what language somebody speaks, it's an area where you can quickly see that somebody gets it or doesn't get it. And when I say get it, I don't mean gets it like understands it, but gets it like I'll do it. Mm-hmm. And has the ability to see things happening and understand why they're happening, because it's like all kinds of traffic and things going in and things going out, and everything from the technology to the physical sortation. And you can see people's wheels spinning, turning when they're in that department. And you'll see some people, you can sort of naturally see where people are going to gravitate towards in the company.
Yes.
And that's a lot of how we make our decisions on where we think somebody would be a good fit based on what we see in that 1 or 2 month training period on the floor.
It makes a lot of sense. So they're in there at the very beginning stage of how your business operates. They're getting their hands dirty and they're learning the basics. So not being afraid to get your hands dirty.
Yep.
There you go.
Lesson 1.
Right. It's so important.
No prima donnas.
Right. Everybody has to learn the basics.
Yep.
Okay. So if you had an innovation lab at Regency, what would be something you would teach in your innovation lab?
I'm trying to think of the best way to say it, but I would say like reverse engineering things. We take things apart for a living.
Yes.
Right? So whether we're going to recycle it or we're going to repair it and reuse it, we like to take things apart, see how they were put together in the first place. Mm-hmm. What is that material made of? What is it? What are the elements that are there? How does it come apart? Hit it with a hammer. Mm-hmm. Drop a shear on it. Test it with memory. Test it without memory. We go through a lot of batteries of examination. We do a lot of time and material studies.
Interesting.
So that's a big part of how we move forward. So we do have, it's not necessarily one innovation lab, but we want innovation and testing going on all the time. And we encourage our managers, if they see something that we haven't seen before, again, going back to that nature of electronics is changing so fast, we can't possibly, know what's coming in every single day. So we have to spot things and then stop them and say, we got a new species. What's it made of? What was it in? Who did it come from? So there's a spirit of that kind of innovation from reverse engineering things.
So true.
Demanufacturing is what we call it.
Okay. So that's a very important part of, I believe you're right, from the perspective of an innovation lab. We believe as well that learning how to take things apart and what's in there, how does it work, why does it work that way, and you can keep going. Like, how did they get to that $9.99 price point once you know what all these parts are in here? So there's a real system and formula for figuring out how did this product come to be. Right. And then, of course, the opposite. For your business, it's what is in this thing and how do I break it all the way down to its basics, separate it, and reuse as much as possible that makes economic sense. Fair?
Correct. And doing it safely.
Yes.
Environmentally friendly.
That's great. All right, so let's say for a moment we had an opportunity for you to speak directly to our to the folks who are creating the curriculum today for our students. If you had a suggestion, would you have anything you'd like to whisper in their ear to say, hey, you could help prepare the kids a certain way, it would be really helpful from my opinion.
Again, I would say that I think we've, in a lot of scenarios, and even in our own company, we try to preach common sense and economics. You've heard me say that a couple times. And I think I see it all the time. I see it in big companies that are clients of ours. I see it in other industries where things happen that don't necessarily make sense, but then they happen and people just sort of feed into them and do them because that's what everybody is doing. We've been very, very committed to if something doesn't make sense, if 1 + 1 is not equaling 2, there's got to be a problem. Even if it means that we might be having financial gain from it, we will walk it back upstream to our clients and say, maybe it's a shipping situation. You're shipping something from California to Ohio because you have a system that said you're only approved to process this material at our Ohio location, and you're spending 35% more than you should. And even though you're paying me for it, we could do this in Olympia, Washington. Why don't we get your people to approve that site? And if you feel that there's some shortcomings, we'll invest and let's do that to make sense. So, and a lot of times people will say, well, why are we doing that? You're pushing, everything's working just fine. So I would say to young people, don't be afraid to call out where there are shortcomings. Take a look at things. And if something doesn't make sense or you're not sure why, don't be afraid to unpack it and try to figure out a better way. Because in the end, even though it might, on a short-term basis, not benefit you, if you're continuously operating from a mindset that, this should make sense, 1 + 1 should equal 2. And if it doesn't, maybe there's a reason. Maybe there's a short-term reason, but ultimately it's going to catch up with you.
That's well said. Yeah, I like the way you're phrasing that. And I want to make sure I'm very thankful that you were giving your time today to our students who were trying to figure life out, So
happy to do it.
Jim Levine from Regency, thank you very much for visiting with us today.
For more information about the innovations and ideas changing tomorrow's world, tune into Tomorrow's World Today, now streaming on Science and Discovery, or visit tomorrowsworldtoday.com.